Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. This is Frank Gaffney, your host and guide for what I think of as an intelligence briefing on the war for the free world. That war has just burst once again into flame in a number of places, really reminding us of what the current magnitude of the threat that we are facing in this free world of ours, with attacks in Paris, attacks in Tunisia, attacks in Kuwait, perhaps others before the day is out. We have with us, I'm very pleased to say, a man who has looked the enemy in the eye for many years, in particular during his years of service to our country in uniform. Four-star Admiral Ace Lyons, retired, now the president of Lyons Associates, LLC, but a man who has distinguished himself both in uniform and in the years since he took it off, in his contributions to the national security debate, notably through his columns at the Washington Times, also as the chairman of the Center's Military Committee. We're very proud to have you with us, sir. Thank you for joining us.
It's nice to be with you, Frank, and your audience.
Well, what do you make of this series of attacks, Admiral? The Islamic State seems to be taking credit for some of them, at least, but otherwise, I guess it's part of the same enterprise, whether it's under their particular banner or not. Who are these masked men, and what are they up to?
Look, Frank, we got to face reality. The worst 6 words George Bush ever uttered was, Islam is a religion of peace. The problem is Islam, and everybody and our political leaders who refer to it as violent extremism, radical Islam, are all wrong. It implies there's some secular or Western version of Islam. There ain't. Erdogan from Turkey said it best when he was prime minister. Islam is Islam. There are no modifiers. So we just have to address it head on. There has to be a reformation of Islam. And it was called for by President al-Sisi of Egypt, and not one Western leader has endorsed it. This is unconscionable. And worse than that, nor has the Pope. The Pope can come out on his encyclical on climate control. He ought to be more worried about Christians being murdered and beheaded throughout the world.
Yeah, en masse. Admiral Lyons, one of the things that, of course, you're addressing here is the impetus behind the jihad that is engaged in the name of Islam, namely Sharia. I think it's fair to say that there are Muslims around the world, including quite a number in this country, who do not embrace Sharia, don't want to live under it themselves, don't want to impose it on anybody else. In fact, we've just done a poll, as you know, at the Center for Security Policy, in which we've identified about a quarter of that Muslim population in the United States are all in on this sort of violent jihadist enterprise, it appears. But the question, I guess, and you're really hitting it directly, is where are the rest of them, and what are they going to do to really disassociate themselves from the jihadists and help us counter them? Am I right?
Yeah, well, Frank, let's see. There are Muslims who do not adhere to the Islamic Sharia law. However, they must speak out. They don't speak out, then they become complicit. You know, we welcome everybody into this country, Muslims included, as long as they are willing to integrate, accept our laws and institutions, our customs and traditions. If they don't want to do that, then let them go to another country where they feel they may be more comfortable practicing their extreme version of Islam.
Admiral Lyons, one of the other perpetrators of this jihad, in particular at the global level, is a country you've, reckoned with and sought to defeat in the war that they have been waging against us for some 36 years, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran. I wanted to get your thoughts quickly on the deal. We're told President Obama is close to finalizing with the mullahs with respect to their nuclear weapons programs and ambitions.
Well, the deal is not a deal. It's a disaster. And what your leaders need to understand, this is a travesty. we've left everything, the core elements of Iran's nuclear program remain in place, in which today they have enough enriched uranium to make 8 to 9 nuclear weapons. We're talking about, at the most, 8 to 9 weeks, and they can have a nuclear weapon. I want to take your audience back to when President Obama was the Democratic nominee to be president of the United States, 3 June in 2008, in which he then opened up secret communications with the government of Iran. And the secret communications were Ambassador William G. Miller, our former ambassador to Ukraine, and more importantly, who was stationed in our embassy in Tehran and spoke fluent Farsi. What the message to the Ayatollah Khomeini was, don't sign any agreement with Bush. Wait until I'm president. You will get a much better deal. You will like my policies. I am a friend of Iran. This is the President of the United States telling this evil regime, who provided the key military and material and training support to the 9/11 hijackers that killed 3,000 innocent Americans. And so the genesis for this travesty of a so-called agreement rests squarely on President Obama's desire to get in bed with an evil regime. It is part of the program to make Iran the dominant power in the Middle East. It's unconscionable.
And very much contrary to our interests, heavens knows. Unfortunately, as you're also well aware, Admiral Ace Lyons, the murder of Americans on 9/11 was just one of the many, many instances in which Iranians have been responsible for loss of life, maiming, and other outrages against Americans. Admiral, let me turn to one other area. Your service to our country in uniform was capped by your time as the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. I wanted to get your thoughts on what has been developing in Asia, but specifically in the South China Sea of late, and whether the United States Navy, and for that matter, the United States military more broadly, and the government for that matter, are up to what needs to be done to challenge and counter what the Chinese are doing in the South China Sea and beyond.
Well, you're quite right, Frank. What's been going on is China's aggressive action and bullying tactics throughout the South China Sea. Their actions really are illegal. But it goes back to when we were forced out of the Philippines in 1991. A vacuum was created, and China quickly filled it. The following year, they declared that basically the entire South China Sea was part of their territorial waters, which makes absolutely no sense. And anything that they declare as their territorial waters, they exclude from any international tribunals. So they will not participate in any international discussions on resolving these conflicts. Now, what's key to what your listeners need to know, why is China doing this? Well, the key rests on their bases that they built on Hainan Island. They've got underground submarine pens there. It's where they're planning to deploy their nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, their space launches, and also to project power throughout not only the Western Pacific, but throughout the Indian Ocean and the Middle East. It is key to their desires, and they will continue their aggressive action until they are confronted. And we have the means. We can confront China there and blunt their aggressive actions.
But we better be quick about it. I think you would agree. Admiral Ace Lyons, I'm afraid we are hard out of time. Thank you so much for your service, as I said, in both uniform and out of it, notably in the latter regard, as the chairman of the Center for Security Policy's Military Committee. We are deeply grateful to you for all you do for our country, sir. Thank you. Keep it up. Next up, Daily Caller reporter Michael Bastash will talk a bit about the Pope's encyclical on climate change that Admiral Lyons referred to and the seeming agenda of global governance. Straight ahead.